Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Are you ready to get down with some D&D? I know I am, and I am joined, as I am always joined, by the modest, motivated, and magnanimous Mad Wizard Merwin. What's up, Shawn?
I am here, Chris. It is a nice Saturday morning. It is starting to get cooler in western New York, which I enjoy.
Yeah, until 2 days from now when it'll be 90 again.
Well, we don't talk about that. We enjoy this 70-degree low humidity weather while we can.
Absolutely. Aside from that, we're going to get into talking about being a CEO of a company some more today, right?
That is true. We'll be talking about that for a bit, but we are going to talk about Chapter 2, at least part of Chapter 2 of Acquisitions Incorporated, the hardcover D&D book.
Mm-hmm. But before that, we have some announcements, and they're both Eberron related. So let's get into the first one, which is Eberron Rising from the Last War, which was announced.
It was. It was teased back at the Descent event in L.A. a couple months ago, but there has not been an official announcement until now. And as usual, it was leaked by someone. Amazon, I think, was the culprit this time. They put it out a couple days early. But Wizards followed up pretty quickly with their own announcement that the book would be called Eberron Rising from the Last War. It will contain everything that players and DMs need to run their D&D games in Eberron. And if you are familiar with Eberron, then you know what's coming. If you're not familiar with it, the overview is Eberron is kind of a magic-fueled world, although the magic is broad but not deep, if that makes sense. So magic, it informs most of society. So there are airships, there are lightning trains, there are things like dragon-marked houses that sort of run different aspects of society. So there's a halfling dragon mark that is all about kind of innkeeping.
Yep,
so,
House Calandra.
Yep, so think of Holiday Inn, right? It's a Holiday Inn franchise, but they're extra special at taking care of people. Except
the Holiday Inn franchise part are the low-end people.
True. That's true. So it's this. It's not quite steampunk. It's kind of magic punk.
It's magic punk.
Right, I would say. And one of the cool things about it is it kind of combines the noir-filled world of post-World War II with that sort of coming off this almost cataclysmic event. So people are both relieved, but they're still understanding that this evil and this tension in the world could come back at any point.
Yeah, this is at the end. Usually games start 3 years after the end of what they call the Last War, which lasted 100 years.
Right.
People think it's going to stick this time because one of the countries, Seir, is gone now because somebody essentially released a nuclear bomb on Seir, which covered it in this gray mist and turned it into the Mornland.
Right. So there was a cataclysmic event that didn't hit the whole world; it just hit this one nation, and so people were like, "Whoa, okay, now it's getting real. Let's step back and reevaluate this." But there's still a bunch of intrigue between the nations. So there's an Indiana Jones feel versus Indiana Jones versus the Nazis sort of feel to it, and then you can stick any sort of D&D trope in there, and it works. So it is a setting that is much loved by D&D fans, especially those who got into D&D during the 3rd edition days, because that's when the setting came out, and it came out of a contest that Wizards of the Coast ran to find a new setting. And Keith Baker, who is the designer of the world, along with some of the folks at Wizards, won that setting contest. So right there was this love for it because it came from the masses, right? It came from the best of the non-designer folks, not at Wizards. And so it's it's a setting that's rich in terms of the game, but it's also rich in terms of the story behind it, how it came to be. So all of those things come together to bring fans who love this setting this new book.
We're getting a lot of actual Eberron next year, this coming year, because of the book that Keith Baker's also putting out.
Yep.
That we talked about last week.
Exactly.
Last week? 2 weeks ago?
A couple weeks ago, yeah. But his project, and anyone can create Eberron content. They can use Eberron IP if you publish it on the DM's Guild. So there's already content there for you if you're interested in it. And Wizards put out a proof of concept version of this on the DM's Guild already that you could get. And so this book, this hardcover will be, some of that updated, some of the stuff from the Unearthed Arcana, like the
Artificer?
Yeah, the Artificer. And there was also dragon marks were covered in the Unearthed Arcana, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we talked about it.
Yep. So so that content's been out there. It's been being play tested, and it's now ready for prime time. So the book will be out in the middle of November.
Should be pretty cool.
Yep. I know I'm looking forward to it, as are a lot of people. I was lucky enough to work in some of the organized play campaigns for Eberron during 3rd edition. Mark of Heroes, I did some writing. And then I oversaw Zendrick Expeditions, that campaign. And so I know that there's a great love for it in organized play as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm running 2 Eberron campaigns right now.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I mean it's been it is well loved for many people. It is their favorite D&D setting.
It's mine. It's very much fantasy mashup of World War I and World War II, like Shawn. Like people say at the end of World War II. I mean, I've heard Keith actually say, like right in front of my face, like it's if World War I and World War II were kind of meshed together historically.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, it's good stuff. Like, if you like all that political intrigue type things and you're missing it from your D&D game and you kind of want more of it, like, because of treaties and things like that and the houses and how they function and the countries and how they function and how there's all sorts of spies everywhere, like, this is really good stuff.
Yep.
Although you don't even have to play it that way because you could just go to Zendrix and then go, running through temples, running away from boulders or giants.
Yep. All those things. And there's, and that we're just touching the very surface of a lot of the stories that you could tell there, because we haven't even talked about like the Kalishtar and the Draconic Prophecy and all of those things go into it. But
yeah, I mean this game really is the D&D of the pulps, the 1920s, 1930 pulp magazines.
Yep.
And I don't mean pulp like two-fisted pulp action. I mean all of it. There's the horror stuff in there. There's the like the Cthulhian horror type stuff with Zoriat and whatnot. There's the Doc Savage type stuff in there. There's the Maltese Falcon type stuff in there. You get all of it.
Right. Yeah, that's totally true. They did a great job when they originally designed the world to make sure that these different stories had a place in Eberron. So that was cool.
They even put the Lost World in there in 2 different ways. There's a whole country with dinosaurs and halflings, and there's a whole country that's overgrown with giant monsters.
Yes, very true. And if you want to get into, like Chris said, the Cthulhian thing, there's the Dream World.
Well, there's that one. Yeah, there's 2 of them, right? There, you can use the Quarry from the Dream, the land of the Plane of Dreams and Nightmares, which is where the Kalishtar and the Quarry come in.
Yep. And
then you can use the Zoriat, the Plane of Madness, and the Delcure, which are like the more physical Cthulhian horror type stuff that does a lot of the some body horror and some madness and things like that.
Yep. So all good stuff, all there. And in a couple of months, we will have access to it.
Mm-hmm. To go along with that, there's something else.
There is. So the Adventurers League wants to get in on the Eberron goodness. So the Adventurers League will be releasing a self-contained season of adventures for Eberron called Oracle of War. One of the reasons I know this is because I am going to be working on it. Will Doyle will be handling the story side of things, and I will be handling the logistical side of getting the adventures out on time, keeping all the trains running. And there are There will be 20 episodes, 20 adventures, featuring Eberron's greatest villains as they conspire with or against the Dragonmark houses to seize control of the Oracle of War, a magical artifact with the power to decipher the Draconic prophecy and steer the future of the world. As factions collide, a small group of scavengers from a remote Mournland salvage base find themselves holding the fate of Eberron in their hands. I want to note a couple of things here. Some people have read this and made some assumptions, and I want to get things straight right now. The key words that I spoke there were self-contained and across 20 episodes. This is going to be a completely different kind of campaign than the Adventures League campaign that you play in the Forgotten Realms. We're going to do completely new and different things. We know that people that love the Forgotten Realms Adventures League, who love having 10,000 adventures that they could run at any given time, may not like the small self-contained nature of this. That's okay.
That's why they have that one.
Right. That's why you can play the Forgotten Realms one. We want to do something different. We want to reach out to new audiences who might not want the Forgotten Realms kind of campaign. And since it's a limited run thing, if it works, great. If it doesn't work, then we'll see what comes next. I don't want to go into too many further details because some things are still being hashed out. But as the end of November approaches, you will hear more and more and more about the campaign.
Do we know when it's coming out?
It will launch at Gamehole Con. You'll be able to play all of the Tier 1 adventures as well as a Tier 1 epic adventure.
Interesting.
So I will say this. When it says across 20 episodes, that's going to be a core storyline. So if you just play those 20 adventures, you will get the complete story. Any epics or any other one-offs we run will be extra. There won't be a lot of them, but there may be options to play, like, say, an epic at every tier. That's just a guess, but, something like that.
I feel like it's a pretty safe guess with Will Doyle being involved.
Yeah.
He likes doing those things.
Yep. So, we're going to keep it limited. We're going to keep it self-contained. And tell a great story. Hopefully people will like.
I hope so too. I am very excited about this. This is exactly the kind of thing that I'm very, very interested in. I'm also interested in seeing how you all do it, because I'm using the James Introcaso led campaign as the basis for one of my campaigns. We're not running it with the AL rules. I'm just using it as inspiration and whatnot.
Sure.
But for instance, one of the adventures is about getting information at a party.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious as to see what you folks do with the adventures, because when I read this thing, it's like a 30-page adventure, or it's like 20 pages of text. I only needed to pull out a page of that information to run my game, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you needed hooks. It seems like there's a lot of information in there that is over information. So I'm hoping that these new adventures will streamline some of that, so that it's not so hard to parse. Because it took me longer to parse it than it took me to convert it.
Yeah, I mean, Adventures League is or any adventure it's always that tension, right, between not enough information and too much information.
Mm-hmm. I say that because that's the running theme for these adventures that I've been trying to convert over for myself.
Right. And so it's always there. Should I add this? Will it help a DM who might not be familiar with Eberron, who might need a little extra information, or who's not comfortable running adventures and ad-libbing, so you want to give them too much, versus giving too much so people are losing the information that is relevant. And so there's always that tension, and we'll see the zeitgeist swing for a couple of years. Maybe it'll build to more and more and more content, and then we'll hit a point where we say, okay, let's try to cut it back, and then the pendulum will swing the other way, and we'll get very skeletal adventures that require the DM to fill in some blanks, and we'll go in that direction until we get a lot of pushback and say, well, I can't run this because I had to prep it in an hour and I couldn't, and then we'll see it swing back the other way. It's always a constant battle to get it right, and there isn't a right because there are so many different audiences and so many different levels of DMs, or DMs being feeling good about ad-libbing, and so it's just
it's funny to me.
It's
funny to me because it wasn't even about ad-libbing. It was just like it was a little bit about ad-libbing, I suppose, because it was like, here's 5 different ways that this could go for like each thing that happened, and here's like 5 other different ways for this could go. I'm like, I get that, but that's hard to parse. It really is. Even for a new game master, like I'm fairly comfortable parsing adventures these days. Mm-hmm. And even for me, there was a lot of information there that I'm like, I don't know what, and it didn't really give me what was relevant.
Yeah, and that's quite possible too. I don't know this
what I'm talking
adventure.
about. Yeah, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. That's why.
No, that's fine. And I'm sure I have written adventures that were too wordy. And
Me too. I have.
Sure I have written adventures that were not wordy enough. I wrote the 8th, I think, adventure in the series you're talking about.
Yeah, it's not that one.
And well, I know. Well, that I remember that there was no party where you were trying to get information out of people. But it was a similar thing to that. You don't want to. If you try to avoid writing an over-linear adventure where you want to give options, right, then you want to... I think the most important thing, now we're going to talk about adventure design, right,
mm-hmm.
is to tell the DM what the goal of the encounter is. And sometimes that might be one goal. They need to get this information. And that sometimes it might be a bullet point list of the information that they need to get. Then it just becomes a matter of, are you going to let the DM decide how they get that information?
Yes.
Right? Or are you going to list every single thing that the characters might do to help the DM? Or do you just list the top 2 things that you imagine the players would do? It's
tricky,
just,
right?
It's what I said, right? It's some DMs are going to be like, how dare you tell me how to run the adventure? And some DMs are going to be, I have no idea how to run this adventure unless you tell me.
It's also like writing a party scene in a D&D adventure is not like, and writing it well is not easy. Like it's because it's not the typical thing that D&D does normally.
Yeah.
It's not hard. It's not as undoable as it used to be, but it's definitely outside of the comfort zone for Dungeons and Dragons.
True. I'm going to look up this adventure because one that I really loved was one that was written by Tom Lamell, the Dungeon Master.
Dungeon Bastard.
It was the 3rd. It was a Baldman Games trilogy. Core 3-3. I don't remember the exact title right now. And you've found out a problem in the first 2 adventures in the trilogy. And I wrote the first adventure in the trilogy, Dan Dillon wrote the second, and Tom wrote the 3rd. And Tom's adventure is a brilliant way to run that sort of, you're at this party and you're trying to figure things out. And he gives scenes, but he also gives great transitions. And what if things go off the rails? There's this. It's wonderful.
Okay, well.
So if you like a good party investigation sort of adventure, then Core 3-3, The Spirited Investigation from Tom Lamell and Baldman Games is for you.
Very cool. Very cool. One more thing before we get to our topic for the day. I think it might have been. It was MT Black had put a tweet out there asking us if we were going to turn our adventure design series into a book.
That's a great question. I think I will be releasing what we've talked about in some form. I don't know that I'm ready to talk about it yet, but one place you could go is to Engine Publishing that has a series of books on a great many topics, including adventure design, I'm sure.
No, they don't.
Really?
That's why we should probably write one.
Yeah, we probably should.
Yeah, they have a Eureka, which is 501 plots,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a little bit about plot development in there. And they have Masks 1001 NPCs, but then they also have the game mastering books, which is Never Unprepared, Odyssey, and oh man, I'm bad. I forgot the third one. I should know. Sorry, John and Phil. And whatever the third one is, there's a third one.
Right.
And then they have Unframed, which is all about improv game mastering.
Yep.
But they don't have an adventure design one.
Specific adventure design book. Well, Engine Publishing would be a great place to write a book for that.
Yeah, and since we own it,
Yeah. It's funny how that works.
Funny. All right. Well, I just wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, I mean, I also mentioned it because I feel like there might be some format that Shawn is writing about adventure design that will be coming out very soon.
It's quite possible.
Quite possible. I'm not sure, though, but it's possible. All right, let's get to our main topic. We're going to talk about Acquisitions Incorporated. This is part 2, growing your franchise. We're going to cover the first half of this chapter, which we're going to hit the franchise like advancement stuff and is that all that's in there? It's really the franchise advancement stuff. You get kind of like how to set up your staff and your HQ features and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into it. This is a really cool chapter. I actually really enjoy this stuff. It's because it gets away from the class stuff, which there's tons of class stuff to me. And this gets into other ways to utilize organizations and money and things like that, and NPCs.
Mm-hmm.
Who doesn't love a good NPC?
Yeah, I love this chapter, and I love the book itself. Now I worked on it, but I didn't obviously write the whole thing, and there's many parts I didn't work on. And so what I love about the book, what we try to do overall, is to create something that covers 3 categories. It covers functionality, making running your game easier. It covers cool narrative points, right? Telling a better, more deep, more resounding story. And then cover mechanics, right? Give the mechanically inclined game player and DM more tools to bring rules into their game which help them run a game they like.
Mm-hmm.
So functionality, narrative coolness, and mechanical depth. We wanted to hit all 3 of those with everything that we could.
Yeah.
And I think that these franchise rules do all 3 of those things.
They very much do. I like to think of games as like in sort of like phases. These days, it's really the Blades in the Dark thing and like Mouse Guard that has sort of put me onto this, like, because what it does is it helps beat structure your game in a lot of ways. Like you can have your adventure-y type stuff, like where you're going out and doing the action-y part of whatnot, but then you can have the other side of it where you are at your home base or in your neighborhood or wherever, talking to people and like building those personal stories too to go along with it, and then eventually you can sort of mix those things together if you're playing your longer campaigns.
Yep.
Also, it just gives you those moments of peace, so it feels like the moments of action are much more intense.
Right, and what it does too is it allows you. It's kind of along the lines of what you're saying, but you know how sometimes when you're running an adventure and there's combat, and you're like, I just need, a bit of role playing, or I need something because it's just this is turning into a grind.
Well, let's scale that.
Oh, yeah.
Let's scale that. What if it's just dungeon crawl after dungeon crawl after adventure, and there's nothing in between that?
Right. And so this lets you do that in an adventure and then come and do this, and it lets, so if people want that combat in their adventure itself, this is another way to alleviate that for people that need a break.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to put the role-playing in your adventure if you don't want. You can get the role-playing in this kind of side business.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So the franchise rank, that is thing. Oh, I wanted to say something about this book too, like reading the text. This thing is always about narrative first. Everything about this is about, like, if you have an NPC, give them a name, give them some traits, make this NPC more than just the cook. Make this NPC more than just these NPC crew that you have, more than just the people that garden. Like they have a look, they have tendencies, they were something before they were working for you. Like this book suggests that you do all of that stuff, and it does it constantly, which is great to me. I love that. Like that's what when Shawn mentions the narrative part of it, giving depth and breadth to your story. That's how you get depth and breadth to your story. It's sort of like if you read a George R. R. Martin book, he's always talking about food, because that gives it some like depth to it. So it's not just politics and killing people.
Right, because we all eat, right?
Yeah, right. And people all have names, and they all have stories and lives.
That's true. That's true.
Even if they aren't the characters.
Yep.
It also makes it harder to kill them, or not as hard to kill them. It depends.
Right, or it gives a little more emotional depth when they are killed.
Or fired.
Or fired, or turn against you, or you drive them away, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the franchise rank now. So it hits it at the tiers that we're all accustomed to. At least that's the suggestion. 1, 5, 11, and 17.
Yep.
That's when your rank goes up.
Right.
And that matters. It has a mechanical impact. And,
sure.
And other impacts on top of that.
Yep. So I just want to talk about tier for a second, because this might be something that, if you're newer to D&D, you didn't even realize. But, D&D does divide their story and their mechanics into these tiers. 1 to 4 is sort of your small heroes, right? Your local heroes. 5 to 10, you move on to do larger regional type of adventuring. 11 to 16, now you're talking about multiple regions that are being affected by the actions that you're taking, if not the entire world by the end of that tier at level 16 or so. And then level 17 or 20, the characters are so powerful that the stories that they get involved in are really dealing with world-spanning, if not planar and universal sorts of matters.
Also, if you really study the mechanisms inside of the game, there are definitely power jumps at those spots too.
For sure. Yeah.
Like it's designed specifically for that.
Right. I mean, from 4 to 5 is huge.
Yeah. Really, from 10 to 11, there's a lot more there than I thought there was. Mm-hmm. Because those spells are different. Like what are they? The 6th level spells?
Yep.
I think they're 6th level spells. 6th level spells are very, in a lot of cases, or at least in a lot of some of the stuff that people get like around level 11, it's very different from the stuff before that.
Yeah. And then at level like 17 to 20, you're getting your capstone abilities.
Yeah. And we're starting to get level 9 type spells too, and those things. Because you're right, a lot of the capstone abilities for classes, they're in that 17-18 range, right?
Yep. So we this deals right along those lines. So when you become a franchisee for Acquisitions Incorporated, you get a license to operate exclusively as adventurers in that area. Now, that doesn't mean other adventurers can't be there. It means other Acquisitions Incorporated adventurers can't be there.
Sometimes, most of the time.
Yeah, except when they are. And that's a whole, intrigue sort of thing that you can bring into the campaign. Mm-hmm. But the license then that you get for your region goes right along the lines of what we just talked about. So when you're a level 1 or rank 1 franchise, you're dealing with a settlement, right? You're in a settlement and the area just around it. So, you're in Phandelver. Mm-hmm. Or Phandalin, and just, the local region. When you go to rank 2, now you're going to get a territory, right? You're going to get not just a settlement, but a larger area around it that might include multiple settlements. Tier 3, now you're talking about a large territory that you have a license for. And you're talking about the Sword Coast now.
Yeah, right? And it might be worth saying, like, this could overlap with other Acquisitions Incorporated groups, but you're working with them or maybe overseeing them. So, like, you become sort of like a manager, a brand manager for that area.
Right. You're now in middle management.
Uh-huh.
Congratulations.
You're in trouble.
And yes. And with Tier 4, now you're talking about, like, extra planar license. Right? Now, go into Eberron and start your franchise there. That sort of thing.
Even though you started on the Sword Coast.
Exactly.
In a wagon.
Exactly. Or, in whatever way you want to deal with extra planar. You could have, your franchise on Avernus Why not?
Mm-hmm. Let's talk real quick about this other thing that I find to be interesting because it implies something. A lot of these areas, these ranks, they also cover the rights to engage in trade with like a number of one or more cities or settlements outside of your area. So
True.
like at rank 1, it's one settlement outside your area or your region. So like that indicates that you should be doing businessy type things.
Yes.
Like there is a subtle, you don't have to, but it envelops that you should. It envelops. Sorry, it makes it feel like you should be.
Right. And so, it could be opening a mine, or it could be, creating dolls, right? It could be anything. You can make it as quote unquote normal D&D as you want. So it could just be creating a trade route, but it could get wacky, like you would see in the Acquisitions Incorporated campaign itself, where you're doing things outside the norm of a regular fantasy D&D game, but it would make sense, in our world.
Mm-hmm. So moving on from there, the nice thing about the franchise is that you get some staff with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like these are NPCs that do for your dues, which you have dues that you'll have to pay, like a licensee, a franchise fee.
Sure.
Every month, and if you don't pay it, it goes bad for you.
Yes.
You get some amount of staff, like that's part of that franchise fee. You get at the lowest levels, you get like just a few people, a major domo, some untrained hirelings, and a skilled hireling. Which I like this a lot because the untrained hireling and the skilled hireling, they actually relate that back to rules from the Dungeon Master's Guide.
True. Yeah, that's absolutely true. In the DMG, it talks about exactly this. So what the Acquisitions Incorporated book does is it just, it kind of puts a label on it, right? It puts a placeholder over it so you can make it fit within this sort of corporate world.
Yeah, and untrained hirelings, they say go look at the Chapter 5 of the Player's Handbook, but they also give some other stuff, like they're general laborers. They just do stuff, like they're cleaners or servers or, gardeners, whatever. But they do the thing that I mentioned before, like give them some personality, give them a leader that acts as the leader for their group of untrained laborers. Do that stuff. Maybe give them, some ideals and bonds and flaws and things like that. And that is a through line for all this stuff.
Yep. As a group, give them a personality individually if you can, but if not, give them a personality as a group. Right?
Yes. Maybe
they were former soldiers in an army. Maybe they were former thieves in a guild that got broken up. Maybe they're a family. So even if you don't want to individually name all of them, if you give them this group thing, you're still creating a story, and you're still giving yourself the tools to work that story into the ongoing narrative of the franchise itself and of the adventuring group, without having to delve too deeply into details.
I'll get to the major domo in a second, but there's also the skilled hireling, which they refer to as interns. And if you've ever paid attention to anything Acquisitions Incorporated, interns are the special guests that they often bring in to play games. Now, you're not going to necessarily do that. You could if you wanted to.
Right.
But the skilled hirelings, they actually have a number of weapons, skill, or tool proficiencies.
Yep.
And they're also, you can look in the Dungeons Master's Guide for that stuff. But if they're going to go adventuring with you, it's suggested that you make their challenge rating, like if you pull a stat block, it's supposed to be half of whatever the highest level character is.
Yep. Or now that we have the sidekick rules out, just make them a sidekick.
Make them sidekicks.
Yep.
The other thing about them is that they'll have the loyalty rating, especially if they're adventuring with you, and you can only really bring one skilled hireling with you at a time on an adventure. Like you can do more if you want to, but that's the suggestion that they make in the book. They suggest doing that to not disrupt the balance.
Right.
Like have one half the CR or sidekick. But like it also then has a link to the at least in the D&D Beyond. By the way, D&D Beyond is wonderful.
Yes,
I'll just constantly be saying that.
Yep.
Use the loyalty rules that are in the DMG. It's really good.
Yeah. And it also gives you as the DM a little leverage now, right? To tell stories, because they've got this hireling who they're bringing along. if they start to abuse that hireling, then you get some pushback narratively on what happens. This hireling could put up with it. They could put up with it for a price, or they could become a liability down the road if they are abused too much.
Yes. Do you know what else this really does effectively? It teaches people, in my opinion, because of some of the suggestions for like where to place them power level wise and whatnot. It'll help game masters figure out how to actually use GMPCs or NPCs as player, like to adventure with the players.
Yep.
Like this is all good stuff because they're not the overpowered power trip fantasy. They're just people who are working, right?
Yeah, they're just trying to make a living just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm. So coming at it from that point of view, it can be very useful to learn that skill.
Yep. The other type of hireling you can have is called crew. We'll go to Major Domo back in a minute. I just want to get crew
absolutely.
out of the way.
Let's get the crew out of the way.
So people were asking, what's the difference between like a crew and an untrained hireling? The crew is there starting at the second tier to basically manage your headquarters, especially if you have a mobile headquarter like a ship or a battle balloon or something that moves.
Or a wagon. I love the wagon.
Yes,
Sorry.
even a wagon. It needs to be run. Someone needs to steer it and maintain it. So that's really what the crew is there for. Hirelings, untrained hirelings, are more, do these specific skills. Keep our garden. Do this. Whereas the crew is there to maintain the headquarter per se.
Yeah, they're and they are. I feel like was that the intent of the design? Because like when I read it, I'm like, the crew is very much like the untrained hirelings in a lot of ways, except they're just more backgroundy. Like those are the ones that I feel like you give them a face to, basically, or you just have the untrained hireling be the face of the crew and they do stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's totally fine too. It was just a separation between hirelings. Untrained hirelings do anything. Crew are specific to keeping especially the mobile franchises going.
Yeah, because they never leave a franchise and cannot perform franchise tasks.
Exactly.
I don't remember if the unskilled hirelings can or not.
Yes, they can.
So that is where it's very different. That is
Yep.
the different role that they truly, if you want mechanically or at least story-wise, what the major thing is that they do differently, it's that.
Yep. And again, the same with the crew as with everyone else. These are the people, if you have an airship, if you have a battle wagon, they're manning it, right? They're manning the weapons, they're manning the helm, and you don't want to upset them because you don't want a mutiny right in the middle of a battle.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in the air, that's super important. So, as the DM, you have options, narratively and mechanically, to reward or mess with your players as you need to.
Yep. The other fun thing about this stuff, we'll talk about the major domo too, is like you can actually have a scene or a sequence where you're doing the interview process.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could just here's you don't have to go through all the interviews, but like you can have like a montage or whatever, or have a couple of groups at least that come in that are interviewing for these positions, because that's the kind of game it is, right? Like,
yep.
And it can be ridiculous. If anybody had seen Deadpool 2, when Deadpool was interviewing for the superheroes, which is oh my god, I'm so bad, not the X-Men, X-Force. Yeah.
Yep.
Then I think that's the name of that. What his group was called. That was hilarious. It was a good gag, and you've seen that gag 1,000 times in a bunch of different movies. So
sure, and it's also a way to give choices, right? There's one hireling, skilled or unskilled, crew or major domo, who is perfect for the job, except they've got, except they're obviously evil, right? And you don't know whether you can trust them. On the other hand, you have this person who is so good, who will be so loyal, but they're just not the best at what they do.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I mean, you're part of a corporation. It's okay to have somebody evil on your team, right?
Sure, why not?
I mean, you're already part of I won't say evil, but I don't know if they're necessarily good people.
Well, I mean,
organization.
I think it's. I don't know if we said that last week, but it's important to say is you can run the Acquisitions Incorporated head office itself in many different ways as well.
Mm-hmm.
You can run them as a totally powerful, oversee domineering group, or you can run them as they're just running by the seat of their pants like everyone else. You can run them as good. You can run them as people who are helpful and they want what's best for everyone, or you can run them as a totally evil, out for themselves and will screw anyone else over organization.
And strangely, you could run them as those things at different times during the course of the campaign.
That is precisely that was my next sentence. So you've got it exactly right. They can be great up until a certain point, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, did we mention the 10,000 gold piece annual franchise dinner that we hold? You pay us 10,000, and we serve you dinner. Anything like that.
Mandatory.
Yeah, mandatory for sure.
But we just paid you our 30,000 gold piece fee for the month.
Right. Well, we had a problem at the home office with the plumbing, and it needed to be fixed. And so I mean, you can run it in any way that fits the campaign you want to run.
What, you don't have the cash? Well, we got this adventure that you can go on in Avernus.
Precisely. Oh, well, in that case,
you got to buy her for some soul stones or soul shards or soul coins. Soul coins, that's there, all right?
Yep. We want you to deliver these soul coins to this demon. Oh, did we mention where he is? Yes.
So there you go. Let's talk about the Major Domo.
Yes.
So you sort of mentioned the Major Domo a little bit, but the Major Domo, they administer your headquarters. They're actually pretty important because while you're out running around adventuring and whatnot, they're taking care of all your bills and your people and dealing with stuff. So they're proficient in charisma, persuasion, and then 2 skills of the DM's choice, and they hang out. They take care of things. That's their gig. We talked a little bit about them before. When I mentioned that at the end of chapter 1 there was like a Major Domo with like a couple of interesting traits, but this goes a little bit deeper into it. It encourages the game master or dungeon master to use the creating non-player character rules in chapter 4 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. So that's how you can fill that kind of stuff out. But that's kind of what they do. That's actually not kind of, it's what they do. Although, depending on who they are and what their backstory is, they might have different influences on the headquarters itself.
Right. And it's like any other character in any story, whether it's a novel or a movie or a TV series or a comic book or whatever. You could play with them, you could do different things with them. You could make them, as loyal as you want. You can make them as disloyal as you want. They can be someone to count on and turn. They could be an enemy for a while until the characters defeat them and show mercy on them, and then they become a stalwart companion. It could be anything. So, use that to the best of your ability as a narrative tool or as a functional tool or as a mechanical tool. Yeah,
it does suggest that they should be in line with the franchise, like as far as their goals go, and they should be, I stress should be, an ally and steward for the party. Yeah, now, that doesn't mean they have to be, but that is generally what you're supposed to do with them.
And it depends on how comedic and how dramatic you want to be, right? When I am running one of these games, what I am doing is I am totally making them an ally to the party. I will give them quirks. I will give them comedic elements, but I am not going to make them a dramatic villain unless the party does something that would make them so.
Yeah, I just like the idea that they are at their core evil, but like they're looking out for the franchise. So like they will be cutthroat in their dealings and whatnot, and they will go to the extra. They will put in the extra effort and go the extra mile and work the 60-hour week, 70-hour week. But when they do that, like they will resort to some duplicitous and terrible tactics, up to and including murder and extortion to do what you need to do.
Right. And one thing, and that's a great thing. A lot of times there's a conflict within the party because of that, right? You capture the goblin leader. He has information. You've got a paladin and you've got an assassin in the party. And the paladin, don't, yes, don't. Oh, the paladin leaves the room. We do what we have to do, get the information, on we go. Sometimes that tears apart a party. It ruins a campaign. If you can move that outside of the group dynamic into an NPC, then you have less. You still have that sort of drama of a campaign without the internal bickering of the party.
For instance, like, I'll give you an example. So, say there's a rival adventuring party in town, like a rival adventuring company, but you're kind of busy doing your thing, like you're off on an adventure. Then you come back from that, and there's like a line item in your cost. It's like 750 gold pieces for petty cash. And you're like, hey, Major Domo Vex, what was that all about? And it's like, I just had to, throw a party for the people, like, and
Right.
they're kind of evasive about it, but like when you look into it, really they hired an assassin to poison the other adventuring party,
Yep.
and there's kind of an investigation going on in the background because of that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So lots of great story can come from that, from any NPC, but making an NPC like this who is so entwined with the party and the story of the franchise becomes a very powerful tool.
Yeah, because they'll solve problems for you, but you might not like the way that they solve those problems.
True story.
All right, let's talk about the HQ, because the HQ is fascinating to me. I like the headquarters. There's a bunch of like little mechanics that go along with it as you rank up and things like that. So, the first thing it says is this should be a group design. Like you should design this thing together, right? Like everybody should figure out what you kind of want to do because it's all of your HQ, right? Then it's about getting sort of like the benefits together. So sometimes the characters will give those benefits, and other times it could be the people that you hire. So that'll help give you some ideas for kind of what you want your headquarters to look like. My favorite one of the examples was definitely the wagon. I love the idea of having a wagon as my mobile headquarters at the beginning, even though they tell you like you shouldn't have having a mobile headquarters is sort of a benefit later. Like having that wagon is great even right at the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it's not terribly too powerful because it can't go that far or that fast.
No.
Right. So that's fine. But that's what the C team has. They have a wagon that they take.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yep.
Actually, I didn't know that. I haven't actually listened to the C team ever.
Yep.
I should probably listen to them. It sounds pretty funny. So your headquarters is a mundane site to start with. It could have been selected or handed down by AI, and it can be a bunch of different things. So that's how that kind of works. It's basically where you get to expand all your stuff from. So I guess the next thing to think about is like, what does it look like? All that stuff. I don't know. Like it doesn't do much at that point, right?
Right. Yeah. You're still just talking about making it your own without having a great deal of power in it. But as you expand up from like to rank 2, now you can double its size. But when you start getting into rank 3, now you're starting to get into even with rank 2, you're starting to put weapons on it, right?
Yes.
So if you're going to put weapons, it's kind of like Chekhov's gun, right? If you're going to put weapons on the thing, you may as well attack it as the DM.
It also can transport at that point. Like even if it's like a static, it's supposed to be a static location. Like you have to figure out how it moves because it can move. Yep.
And then so when you get to rank 3, now you're starting to get into arcane features. So it can be as a bonus, you can cover it in darkness or fog. You can be up in the clouds. You can do. You can change his appearance.
Yeah, you also get another choice from rank 2 or 1.
Yep.
Mostly rank 2, I would imagine.
Yeah. So in general, it's just a way to build a stronghold.
Yeah. Let's talk about this for a second now. So let's talk about rank 2. one, you get a cosmetic choice. You can gussy up the way that your thing looks, right? Like, so your wagon can now be like gilded on the outside. It can have or illusory, not illusory, but like panels that change scene, right? Like it or can change color, like whatever you want it to be. There's a whole bunch of things. They mentioned like you can have a ship that you have decked out in like brass fixings, so it looks like a bronze dragon or a brass dragon. That's one of the examples, but it's really cool. And then of course expansion, right? Like you can have another tower or a level to your you can have another floor to your inn or your spot that you have in a tower in Sharn or whatever. You could have another wagon, like you now have a wagon train. Personally, I like the idea of having a door inside that you open and it just like a little pocket dimension.
Yep.
Like that's where I would go with it. That's me though. And then transportation, like you can move up to 30 miles a day. I mean, you could probably do more. Like, and if you have, like, for instance, the wagon one, it can teleport. I mean, you don't know you know where you're going to end up, but you don't know how you're going to get there.
Yep.
Which is what they suggest in the book.
Right.
And like Shawn mentioned, the weapon, the idea behind the weapon is it's supposed to be a siege weapon. It's supposed to be operated by two people. It could do some damage, but it's really bad against hurting small groups of individuals.
Right.
Like, it's a scale thing. Like, it's for fighting dragons and things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, so those are the things to remember about it. There are mechanical things that kind of go along with this, or at least story-based suggestions that kind of go along with this stuff. You mentioned that's at Tier 2. That's pretty neat to me. When you kick to Tier 3, like you mentioned, there's like an arcane thing that comes along with it. And Shawn mentioned that already. There's a number of pieces that you can utilize for that. I mean, it's really where the imagination can go, and as long as the game master approves it, and it doesn't seem like it's going to get all weird and game breaky and whatnot. Because this stuff is supposed to be cool, but it's not supposed to be like overpowering. I mean, it's supposed to have the same powers like a guards and ward spell, or in that area. That's the idea.
Yep.
The arcane feature part, like, you could have all sorts of cool stuff. Like, the examples they have are the ever-changing ship or a spectral waitstaff. So, like, that's essentially a seeming spell. Or you have a constant unseen servant spells being around. Like, these things aren't supposed to give you a lot of mechanical advantages. They're just supposed to be neat. Then, what's the next one? The other one was, like, you can pick a thing from the previous tier. So, like, you can have a second weapon, or your weapon can do more damage. Maybe that's the time that you expand your weapon to actually hurt, like, smaller groups of people, too, right? Like, that's a thing you can do. Like, oh, now it's precise, so it can actually, like, harm that group of goblins.
Or, if you have a wagon, it shoots a shockwave spell out of the front.
Yeah, there you go. That's neat.
Yep.
I like the idea of the statue. There's, like, a walking, like, you could be in a statue, like, that kind of walks around. That's always fun. So then it's like, it can usually smack stuff, like if it was Big B's hand, or when you get more precise, maybe the smack just does more damage, or it causes like a little earthquake in the area around it, right?
Yep. I think one of my favorites is the glider launcher.
The glider launcher.
If you've got a battle balloon, it's you could shoot a glider out of it that can hold you. So if you're getting attacked, you can just glide away.
Oh, that's so good. I'm reading it now. I didn't read that one before. That's so funny.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's immune to poison and psychic damage. That makes sense. Yep. That sounds solid. Although, if you're not proficient, you might need to make checks.
Yeah.
Because to pilot the glider successfully.
Right.
I mean, I guess you just say proficient glider. Like, is that what you do at some point? Like, you just take a level and you're like, yeah, I'm going to be proficient in glider. Because I don't know if that's a thing, right?
Yeah, tool airship. Because there's, like, navigation, so...
So at ranks 3 and 4, you also get another one of those choices we talked about. At rank 4, you get a secret feature. I love the secret feature. That's the glider launcher is one of those secret features, right?
Yep.
The escape. There's like an escape pod, like as an example. It's like the head like shoots off of the statue and flies away, right? Like stuff like that.
Yep.
They're hard to see too, so they actually have some. Like, you have to make a DC 25 intelligence investigation check or wisdom perception check to notice these things.
Right.
Like, for people who are trying to attack you or cause you trouble. So it's really hard for people to know that you have it, which is neat.
Yeah. And again, if you're building these things, for your, as the DM, if your group are putting these things in, at some point you have to make them useful.
Mm-hmm.
So the god who the franchise has upset because they raided its tavern or raided its temple is coming after them. So now the escape pod is necessary. The gliders are necessary, right? The extra dimensional rooms in your tavern are going to come in handy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Like those, all that stuff should be fodder for story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the point of having it on the table if you're not going to use it at some point?
Yep.
So that's the building up your headquarters as you tier up. Then there's the costs, because everything gets more expensive as you go up. So it's actually pretty simple. Like, to calculate this stuff, there's a baseline cost for each of these things. You can kind of figure it out from this chart that they have in the book. And then there's a multiplier depending on the tier that you're at. So, like, if you're at tier 1, it's just times 1. So if I remember correctly, if you have a wagon, it's 15 gold pieces a month. And it's times 1, so it's always 15 gold pieces a month until you get to tier 2.
Yep.
Then it's 1.5, so it's like 22 gold pieces a month to maintain your wagon, including all of your staff.
Yeah.
Because it's all included in there. So it's a real easy mathematical equation.
Yep.
Like, you don't have to do a ton of math. You can use a calculator on your phone or whatever, paper if you prefer paper. The thing is once you get a little bit more intense, I suppose, with what you have, then it could cost more. So, like, say you have multiple, like, satellite operations, those also all get added up together.
Right.
So, man, if you have a sailing ship that's, like, trading, and you have your wagon, and you have, like, an airship somewhere else, like, that is, the airship's 800, the sailing ship's 200, your wagon's 15. So that's 1,015 gold pieces. You just add that up, and then you just multiply it times the multiplier. It's still not that complicated.
Right. Yeah, and it's a quick and dirty way to figure out what you should be taking away from the party based on the treasure that they're getting. And you can always adjust it for different things as well, on the fly. But it's a really easy and cool baseline way to figure this out.
Yes, absolutely. And if you really want to get more granular with it all, you could use the reoccurring expenses section of Chapter 6 of the Dungeon Master's Guide, but I feel like it's not necessary.
Sure.
Some of this money is also for the tithe to the head office, to keep your license. If you can't ever pay the entirety of your thing, eventually your business, like the AI headquarters, will be like, "Hey, what's going on?" Especially if it's like 2 months or more that you don't pay. If that's defaulting, it's a problem. It's kind of a huge problem, actually. They'll come and, like, send inspectors, maybe send a different organization to set up in your area.
Yeah. If you're not able to get the money out of the area, someone else can.
It's a corporation. There's that. There's some other stuff, monthly business performance. This is something to do with the franchise task and downtime section, but we're going to talk about that next episode.
Yep.
I don't think there's anything else to talk about now. I think we've covered everything we're going to cover this week.
No, and the cool thing is, as people have said in reviews, even if you're not into Acquisitions Incorporated at all, you can use these rules for anything. You can use these rules for guilds. You can use these rules for other kinds of shipping businesses. Right? Any sort of business that you want to put into your game doesn't have to be this kind of dark humor corporate thing. It can just be a guild. It can be any sort of medieval business, and you can build it with these rules.
Absolutely. Is there any other final thoughts besides that?
Nope.
Well, thank you all so much for listening. I suppose we should do some Patreon shout-outs. Stephen Farrell, The Tabletop Bellhop, T. Acoustic, Theodore Atkinson, Thomas Bagley, Victor Wyatt, Zach Goins, Noah Bond, Austin Lemke, Chris Foster, or Best Chris, Dan Simons, David Walker, Donahue McCarthy, Drew Smith, Evil Rich, Glenn Seiler, Jason Pitt, Jean Lorbert, Jeff Stevens, Jim Morrison, and John Just John. And speaking of patrons, if you'd like to be a patron of Down with D&D, you can click on the link to our Patreon page on the website. And for $2 a month, you can get yourself a shout-out.
Or for $4 a month, you not only get a shout-out, but you also get to see our show notes. And you have access to our Slack room where you can chat with us about your favorite D&D topics.
Yeah. If you can't help us monetarily but want to give us a boost, you can do so with a Apple Podcast review or a podcast review anywhere.
Apple Podcast is what many podcatchers used as their way to rate and rank shows. So if you listen and you want to leave a review, you can do so via Apple Podcast.
Shawn, where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Shawn Merwin, or go to our new forums at forums.misdirectedmark.com, where we have different channels, including our very own Down with D&D channel.
Yeah, if you post comments there, we will generally respond to them. I try to check the forums at least 3 times a week.
Yep. How about you, Chris? Where can we find you other than the forums?
On Twitter, it's the Light 101, or at Misdirected Mark, which is the show in the network Twitter. That's another great way to get a hold of us. In fact, our manager Rob always manages to kick us those things when we get them. You can also just go to the website and leave a comment if you want. We actually had some comments from some previous shows on there. I should probably bring those up at some point in the not too distant future.
Yeah, let's do that next time.
Yeah.
Right.
You can also catch other great shows, such as Zhang Yu Hustle. So if you like wuxia, you can go there and listen to Eric Farmer and Eli Kurtz in Zhang Yu Hustle. Eric and Eli make their kung fu stronger by watching wuxia films and then discussing how to apply their observations to game design, because they're designing a wuxia game.
Down with D&D is a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs.
Mm-hmm. Shawn, buddy old pal, Mr. Mad Wizard yourself, what are we going to do now?
We're going to go kill some corporate monsters.
Corporate monsters? Ah!
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This